Today, we're keeping it relatively modern and checking in on a game that came out in 2020. Sort of. It's more complicated than that. The story behind this game is a unique one. The game itself actually began life with a different name. But eventually, this little visual novel adventure game came to be known as Woodsalt. Welcome to episode 2 of Procedurally Generated. Woodsalt released on the Nintendo Switch on October 13th, 2020. Then, a few months later, released on Windows and Mac on January 25th, 2021. The game was both developed and published by Woodsalt Entertainment Limited, also known as Team Woodsalt. They hadn't released anything prior, and haven't released anything since. Woodsalt is a single-player sci-fi RPG paired with visual novel elements. It utilizes a chibi art style and uses 3D exploration to discover the world around you. That world is called New Terra, and it is home to roughly 1 million people that had to abandon a besieged Earth via a large spacecraft called a carrier. The carriers were supposed to return to Earth when the coast was clear, but a technical mishap forced the carrier to land on this strange planet instead, and 1,000 years have since elapsed. Now the survivors must establish whether fixing the carrier and returning to Earth is the right choice, or if staying put is the better course of action. Therein lies the main conflict in which the game is founded. The player steps into the role of MC, who has just been woken up from stasis and introduced to the strange new world. MC is almost immediately subjected to nightmares and horrifying visions that seem unique to him and him alone. In terms of the character himself, MC was actually envisioned as a blank slate. In fact, his name, MC, is based off of the term main character, M.C. His persona is one that is influenced by those in his circle. As such, he is joined by a large cast of characters who not only add layers and contribute to the development of the character, but their stories are also shaped then by the decisions you make as MC. As I stated before, the game plays out as a cross between a top-down JRPG and a visual novel, but it handles its storytelling in a unique way. You can always push the main story, but every so often you'll come across the holographic versions of one of the characters in the game. It's at that time you can choose to experience a section of that character's side story. Those side stories, at least in the beginning of the game, play out as bite-sized vignettes which create a unique way to make progress. I found it unique for a game that labels itself as an RPG. Typically, bite-size and JRPG aren't two terms that play nice together, but the creator referenced his own annoyance with RPGs unnecessarily padding to expand the playtime. Therefore, he set out to create the ideal busy person JRPG. Development of Woodsalt began around 2015 or 2016. The driving force behind the game's development and the creator of the story is one George Barry. I'm fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to sit down and talk with George about the development of the game and some of the more interesting details surrounding it. I'm glad I did too, because throughout my research I found that there were some questions that I couldn't really find good answers to. As I said before, Woodsalt Entertainment has never released a game prior to this and hasn't released anything since. Their website was not accessible and overall information on them was very limited. The questions I had, George answered, and he did so in a very open and candid way. I invite you to check out the bonus episode that I'm going to post alongside this. You should absolutely check it out, as it'll consist of the entire interview and provide further insight into much of what I'm about to discuss. But here's what I learned from our conversation. I personally purchased the game from Steam. I had no problem. But when I went to look for the game on the Nintendo eShop, I couldn't find any sign of it, both on the Switch and on Nintendo.com. So I asked George, what's the status of the game on Switch? He said that after meeting with some publishers, the decision to self-publish and work with a PR company is the route that they decided to take. About 2 weeks prior to the launch, that PR company had to pull out due to their own struggles caused by the COVID pandemic, which left Woodsalt a bit in the lurch in terms of promotion. George explained that the 2 weeks leading up to the release are perhaps the most important, and to have the rug pulled out like that really led to a disappointing launch, which George estimates to have been maybe 500 copies being sold. Fast forward a few months, and ultimately the decision is made to remove the game from the storefronts with the intention of taking what they'd learned, making changes based on player feedback, and delivering a redux of sorts with a bit more pomp and circumstance. Another thing I noticed in my research is that the studio's website redirects to what looks like a Chinese holding company website. When I asked about this, he revealed that Team Woodsalt is actually no more, and that they're changing the company name. Right now, the website being down is basically a casualty of that rebrand. When looking back, I also found that originally the game wasn't called Woodsalt. It began life as Sonder. When I asked about the name change, he let me know that he had the name trademarked and had completed the steps needed to secure rights to it. Even so, about 6 months prior to the game's release, he came across another game on Steam called, you guessed it, Sonder. While he had every right to pursue legal action against the company, he decided against it as he recognized the similarities between the company he had and the other company in question. For him, it was less a legal dilemma and much more of a moral one. He also made the good point that taking that company to court would be way more work and take way more resources than simply changing the name to Woodsalt. Coincidentally, Woodsalt has much more personal meaning to George, and you can hear more about that in the interview. Prior to release, there was some controversy surrounding George and a quote that PC Gamer had run as their byline. The quote read, "Inspired by Persona, but without the grindy nonsense." This ruffled the feathers of fans of the Persona games, but also George himself. When I asked him about the article and the fervor surrounding it, it's something that very much still chaps him to this day. He blames PC Gamer for weaponizing that rather mundane statement to cause an uproar and push further engagement for their website. This is a family show, so I can include some of the quotes here, but again, check out the bonus episode to get George's full thoughts. They're worth listening to. I wrapped up the interview by wanting to know what was next for George, the team, and Woodsalt in general. He has every intention of continuing to develop, with his focus primarily being the re-release of Woodsalt. In terms of the company, Team Woodsalt has already been rebranded to Barry Edmund. He's also considering, but not sold on the idea of changing the name of the game from Woodsalt to something else when the re-release takes place. But the story of Woodsalt is by no means complete. He stated that there are around 5 games written that continue and precede the events of Woodsalt. He tried to recall the exact order of games and started with a game called Jack of All, which explains the creation of the company responsible for creating an important character in Woodsalt. Then Fierce, which dives into the creation of that being. Fierce Epilogue, which explains that being's ascension to godlike status. After Fierce Epilogue would be Woodsalt Exodus, which shows the actual fall of Earth leading to the events of Woodsalt. Then there are 2 games that take place at the exact same time as Woodsalt called Hillcrest and Hello Spaceman. The final game in the series is titled Epilogue. That's not it though. Everything from those games eventually leads to a book that George is working on as well called Satellite. Now obviously these are lofty goals, but step 1 according to George is to fix Woodsalt and make something successful enough to fund those ambitions. He's also open to the idea of using graphic novels as a way of conveying parts of the story, and also wants to toy around with creating games in different genres and references Nier Automata as an inspiration. For the full discussion, once again, make sure you check out the bonus episode that's linked below. And as always, thank you all for checking out episode 2 of Procedurally Generated. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and if you really enjoyed the show, share it. I'll see you all next time.